So you've probably heard about the recent news about Glenn Greenwald, the award-winning journalist Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept, resigning from The Intercept. And so it's all over the place, and so I'm not going to really go into a whole lot, but I'm just going to give my thoughts about it and maybe share a little bit of Glenn Greenwald's article. But firstly, I want to say that there's these different levels of journalism, and I use that word lightly. There are these echelons of journalism like Rachel Maddow, and I'm saying journalism in quotes, where they're really just stenographers for the US national security state. So they put out the talking points about Russiagate that is really just based on nothing, and every time there's more and more of it is disproved, they just continue to ignore the facts and continue pushing that narrative because it fits in with the anti-Trump the Trump derangement syndrome, where they're only interested in something if it's going to smear Trump. And people like Maddow are sort of basically propaganda arms of the Democratic Party and the national security state. And she gets like $30,000 a day for doing that, even though she knows it's rubbish. She knows it's just propaganda and nonsense, but I mean, money talks. People like that, they sell out any sort of journalistic integrity they once had, if she ever had it, and they go ahead and put out propaganda there's no facts really behind it. Really, there's no verifiable facts behind it. And even when it's found out that there's nothing behind it, and that it's been disproven, they continue to put it out because it serves their donors, their advertising donors. For MSNBC, it serves the Democratic Party. It serves different, and the Democratic Party is a warmongering corporate party. Then there's Glenn Greenwald, who was making, as he says, obscene amounts of money in The Intercept. He helped Edward Snowden with Edward Snowden's NSA, being an NSA whistleblower. He put himself at great risk. He's also put himself at risk by exposing Jair Bolsonaro, the fascist leader in Brazil. He lives in Brazil, Glenn Greenwald, and his partner. He is a socialist in government, and so Glenn Greenwald requires bodyguards, and because he's had death threats against him. And, he has a lot of lawyers now because of the, he's trying, I don't know if Jair Bolsonaro is trying to sue Glenn Greenwald, but anyway, Glenn Greenwald, he was making like about $500,000 a year at The Intercept. He started The Intercept with Laura Poitras and Jeremy Scahill, and it was supposed to be a kind of a leftist news journalistic site that was sort of pushing against the mainstream BS, right? Now, I don't know everything about this, but I know that Pierre Almider, I think his name is, who owns PayPal, he's a billionaire. He was put money behind this. They don't require advertising on this on The Intercept, and they're all making a lot of money. And as Glenn Greenwald said, a lot of the people working at The Intercept hardly need to write anything at all, and they make hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's a cushy job. And Glenn Greenwald joined there to be able to do journalism, to be able to address what he wanted to address. And I haven't really followed him for a while because I follow some things that he does, but The Intercept, I lost all sort of respect for it a few years ago when I saw, that they were pushing the Russiagate nonsense. And of course, that's now led to a new Cold War with Russia, basically. It's a very, very dangerous narrative. And a lot of it was just, that narrative was devised in part by Hillary Clinton when Hillary Clinton was exposed by WikiLeaks, and the Podesta emails were exposed by WikiLeaks, which showed that, her corruption, which showed that she was elevating Trump with the Pied Piper strategy, thinking that she was going to easily win over Trump. Well, that didn't work for her. The corruption of her campaign was exposed, and so they devised this Russiagate narrative that, that Trump was a Russia puppet, like a Manchurian candidate. I'm sure Russia could have done a lot better than Donald Trump, and in fact that caused Donald Trump then to actually be more hawkish on Russia than Obama was, and Obama was hawkish too. And now the United States the U.S. empire has pulled out of all these different treaties, which has caused is causing this nuclear arms race, which is incredibly dangerous for the world. So that Russiagate narrative, and it was completely false that he was a Russian puppet and a Manchurian candidate. And you can almost guess when the mainstream media, the corporate media, put out something like that. And when they put out something like that, you sort of know, because they're really beholden to the Democratic Party, these various media outlets, that it's probably a problem. There's probably real problems with it. We have to sort of think about and critique the motivation behind corporate-owned, media outlets that are putting out certain narratives, particularly, any of them basically. I mean, Fox News is owned by the Murdoch Press, and the other MSNBC and CNN. They're all sort of beholden to the Democratic Party. They push that narrative. They hide things like the Hunter Biden, Burisma thing. Anything that is going to impact their party, the Democratic Party, in a negative way, they tend to hide. And anything, even if it's false about Donald Trump, they will push that. And so Donald Trump really does have an axe to grind when he says about the fake news. That actually is fake news that they've been pushing about him. And yes, he has reason to be upset, but the sad thing is that there was so much that they could have reported on about Donald Trump, like the genocide in Yemen that he's been conducting, that started with Obama and is still ongoing. There's a whole bunch of things. He's corrupt as all get up, just like any of these presidents, any of these politicians. They're all taking lobbyist money. Joe Biden was just recently talking on Joe Biden a couple of years ago was bragging about how he got the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor that was, a Ukrainian prosecutor, and it had something to do with Burisma and his son Hunter Biden.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So he actually threatened the Ukrainian government, saying, well, I'm not going to give you this $1 billion that we're going to give you if you don't fire the Ukrainian prosecutor who supposedly is corrupt, right? That was going to prosecute something about Burisma and was looking into the corruption in Burisma, the big gas company. This is all, this is all related to Joe Biden and these recent leaked emails that he knew about. He'd actually met with with somebody from Burisma, even though Joe Biden says he didn't. So there's a there with these recent revelations about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Burisma. Which brings me to why Glenn Greenwald decided finally to quit the awful Intercept, which he said went pear-shaped a long time ago. He didn't use those words, but you can tell by the way he talks about them and the different things that the Russiagate stuff that's nonsense. How they treated Reality Winter, the whistleblower. Basically, it was terrible how they didn't protect Reality Winter, and now she's in prison. There's a lot of problems with the Intercept, and it's all over the place. It's like a dog's breakfast. You get some good reports, and then you get some awful reports. But I don't know how it could ever have been any good with a billionaire backing it. I really don't. And he's obviously a Democratic Party supporter, because the reason Glenn Greenwald decided to quit was because they told him, and this is amazing because he started The Intercept, and his contract was that he could publish whatever he wanted about anything he wanted. They actually read in the Riot Act and said, you cannot publish this thing about Joe Biden and Burisma, the recent leaked emails. You can't do that. And not only can you not do it on The Intercept, but you can't do it anywhere else, which is would be a deal breaker for anybody, really, unless, of course, you love the money, which a lot of the people at The Intercept, I'm sure, do. And unfortunately, so he decided to leave. So Naomi Klein, who I've never really liked much, because I just feel like it always concerns me when, journalists and some are journalists and some aren't, are at cushy jobs where they're being paid $500,000 a year. That always concerns me, if it's because there has to be somewhere in it along the line, there has to be some reasons why a billionaire would back something like that. And it turns out, of course, that he obviously wants Biden to win, so he doesn't want anything that might, sort of upset that, upset Biden winning. I don't think Biden is going to win, even though the polls say that he's going to win. He looks like he's going to win. I don't think that's the case. Sadly, I think people are going to get a real shock if they go by the polls. So anyway, the Intercept said you can't publish that, and that's when Glenn Greenwald said that he was going to resign, which he did a couple of days ago. And unfortunately, the Intercept has gone about, instead of addressing the facts about what Glenn Greenwald was wanting to talk about, addressing the facts about why Glenn Greenwald wants to leave. Instead, they just smear him, which shows, when you are smearing somebody and you're not addressing the issues, the content, it means you have no argument, really. So that's what they've been doing with Glenn Greenwald, and including Naomi Klein, who I mentioned just before, who has been smearing him as well. Basically said he's leaving, he's a grifter, and he's leaving to be on Substack, which is where journalists go a lot of journalists go when they've been pushed out of a particular journalist organization because the journalist organization doesn't want them to be telling the truth about something. That's often the case. So Glenn Greenwald has gone on to Substack, which is like Patreon, and you pay, I think, a yearly or monthly, donation thing. And he said, look, if I really wanted to, make money, I wouldn't leave The Intercept. He said it's an incredibly cushy job. So, this idea, this smearing that The Intercept is now doing of Glenn Greenwald, and that includes Naomi Klein accusing him of leaving because, of money, he said is ridiculous. If I wanted money, I would stay.
It's so ironic because The Intercept is a place, probably more so than anywhere else in media, where you make an obscene amount of money, not just me, for doing very little if you want, because of the way it's funded. It has no advertisers, no subscribers. People there are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They write very little. No one reads what they write. It doesn't matter. They're going to be there for life if they want. Same with me. I was making a huge salary, but on top of that huge salary I was making, The Intercept pays my assistant. It pays all the huge team of very expensive lawyers in Brazil that I have to fight off the criminal case that is still pending. And most importantly, it pays all of my security needs in Brazil because of the threats that were provoked by my husband being a socialist member of Congress and the reporting we did last year. The chances that no matter how well my Substack does, I'll ever get to that level is extremely low. I was making not just a huge salary, more than I need in life, but The Intercept was providing enormous amounts of resources for things I need for my family and for my life. If I were motivated by money, I would have just sat at The Intercept forever until something better came along. It was a huge gamble for my family and a huge risk. And if I can't imagine anyone thinks that money is the reason to leave The Intercept. Money is the reason to stay at The Intercept.
I think that's probably the case. It looks like, if you wanted to make money, you just stay at The Intercept. He said it's an incredibly cushy job. But I always really have to wonder, when I found out how much money Glenn Greenwald was making at The Intercept, I was thinking, wow, obviously he was able to continue on doing what he was doing, not being constrained by the leanings of The Intercept, and he was still able to put out stuff that was countering the Russiagate propaganda, the anti-Russian propaganda. He was able to put out stuff countering that, even though that made The Intercept very angry. He was able to do that, which I suppose all those different things probably ended up culminating in him leaving. I found it disturbing that he was kind of working for The Intercept because of all the stuff that I found problematic that they were putting out. But anyway, and Glenn Greenwald has some problems too in relation to China. I think he's sort of like not really pushing back on the anti-Chinese propaganda like he should be. That's a problem. Maybe he will, maybe he will do that on his Substack. I don't know, but that's a problem. There's some other problems too, and Robbie Martin from MAME Politics has sort of talked about that. Like when I see people like, say, Abby Martin and Max Blumenthal, I don't know how much money Max Blumenthal makes a year, but I bet you it's not $500,000. And I'm sure that Abby Martin is not making anywhere close to $500,000. I'm sure that Anya Parenpool from the Grey Zone is not making anything close to $500,000, anywhere near that. I think they're all these different journalists that I consider real journalists are not making that much money. And I think that's why they don't get picked up by places like The Intercept. That's why I don't think Rising has had Abby Martin on. I don't think so. You know, The Rising, which I've critiqued in an earlier video. You can find that. Because they always defer to Tucker Carlson, who's a white nationalist, who is a rabid anti-Chinese. He's pushing a war against China. There's real problems with The Rising. And Sagar and Getty is sort of always he's almost got this sort of almost like a hero worship of Tucker Carlson. And I wonder what will happen if Tucker Carlson runs in 2024, which I expect that he will run for president in 2024. And I bet you Sagar and Getty will be standing him at that time, like he does now, even though he's pushing a war with China and all of that. And he's a white nationalist, and he's bagging the Black Lives Matter protests. He's horrific, Tucker Carlson. And I know that Glenn Greenwald says he goes on Tucker Carlson because there's an audience there and he can talk about Julian Assange and that kind of thing, important topics. But I don't know. You know, all these different cable news shows, they'll put on somebody to prop up, like if Glenn Greenwald knows it. Anybody who goes on these shows knows that Tucker Carlson will have them on if he's pushing against, if they're pushing against the Democratic Party or whatever. Not that that's the idea of going on to push against the Democratic Party, but they're talking about, say, corruption of Joe Biden or whatever, and Hunter Biden. Tucker Carlson will have them on because that props up his narrative about the anti-Democratic Party. But then, then Tucker Carlson will have somebody on we'll have Glenn Greenwald on talking about Julian Assange. And Trump is behind the whole prosecution of Julian Assange. Obama was behind it. Obama pretended to be for whistleblowers and then ended up prosecuting a whole bunch. So I don't know. Tucker Carlson's all over the place, but, I think that he's really problematic. But, anyway, the bottom line is that the people that I feel should be making like $30,000 a day, even though that's an obscene amount of money, like Rachel Maddow makes, or $500,000 a year, which is what Glenn Greenwald was making at The Intercept, are the people that I really think should be making that kind of money because they're not partisan. They're actually, and they're talking about U.S. imperialism, which is something that is not really properly addressed by even Glenn Greenwald. He might talk about things like Russiagate, but they're not talking about the wars, as far as I can tell, the constant warmongering by the Democratic Party and the GOP. And it doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter if it's Trump or Obama. It's just a continuous thread of the national security state basically is running the show. And these are just the front puppets. And it's continual warmongering that is really devastating to Iraq, Iran, the economic sanctions that are an act of war. It's the Venezuela, Bolivia, it just goes on and on and on. And I don't see so much pushback from these, like people like Glenn Greenwald and people that make a lot of money. They don't really heavily focus on U.S. imperialism. Maybe I'm wrong with, say, Glenn Greenwald. Maybe he has. I haven't followed everything he does. But, there are reasons why people make a lot of money in these journalist sites, is because there are things that they mightn't be talking about or things that they might be censored to talk about, or they're just straight up, like Rachel Maddow, just pushing the line that is there. They have the talking points from the U.S. national security state, and they are propping up the Democratic Party left and right. And, it's completely partisan and all of that. So anyway, Glenn Greenwald says, today I sent my intention to resign from The Intercept, the news outlet I co-founded in 2013 with Jeremy Scahill and Lara Portress. Oh, and I forgot to mention, and also Manar Muhuesh from Mint Press News. I mean, she's an amazing journalist. Why isn't she making $500,000 a year? I think we know the answer to that, because she also pushes against U.S. imperialism. She also is not partisan. Why is the Black Agenda Report? Why is Ajama Brackett? Now, he wouldn't call himself a journalist, but they do incredible work at the Black Agenda Report. Really great work. Why aren't they rolling in dough? I think we know the answer to that, because they're pushing against white supremacy. They're a black leftist site. They have a leftist perspective, and they're addressing white supremacy and U.S. imperialism. So you only have to look at what journalists focus on, real journalists. I use that word in the real sense of, not submitting to government narratives, not basically holding governments to account. That's what journalism is supposed to be. And they're also, and that means also that they're supposed to be pushing against and exposing war crimes, which is what Julian Assange and whistleblower Chelsea Manning did. And look what's happening to Julian Assange. He's on the verge of being extradited to a special administrative measures prison, which he'll never ever see another human being again. It's torture. It's torture that he's been going through since 2010 in the Ecuadorian embassy. This is how we treat people, publishers and journalists And this is how we treat whistleblowers who are exposing war crimes and exposing government corruption. And that's what's going to happen to anybody who exposes government corruption and war crimes, and war is a crime. They're going to end up probably like Julian Assange. If Julian Assange gets extradited to the US, that is probably the official end of journalism. And I can see that happening because there was a kangaroo court in the UK. I'm not going to go into all of that. You can check out Kevin Gostola's work on Twitter, and he's got it, shadowproof.com. He's done great work. So, this is the thing. Journalism is dying. The fourth estate is dying, and there's only like a handful of people now actually doing any decent work. And once real journalism dies, you say goodbye to the skerricks of democracy that are left. It's in tatters now, democracy, because basically there is no fourth estate to speak of. And anybody who is doing real journalism is crushed by algorithms and censorship, and like what's happening to Glenn Greenwald. But look at what's happening to Abby Martin and Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil, Manar Muhuresh, and all those different journalists. They're crushed by algorithms, and nobody will have them on these mainstream media shows, even like The Rising, sorry. They won't have people like Abby Martin on probably talking about what's really happening about US imperialism. It's all just low-hanging fruit electoral politics, which is really just a lot of theatre, a lot of it. Occasionally they might do something that's good, but basically it's just, it's not really getting to the root of the problem, which is US empire. It's not getting to the root of it at all. So what's the point? This partisan play, this partisan theatre.
It's a sickness, and I think it just, again, goes back to this American exceptionalism that's diseased so many people, and we need to get out of that framework, and we need to get out of that line of thinking and become internationalist in our perspective, where everyone around the world is the same as us. We're all human beings. We all bleed the same blood, and our government is responsible for so many goddamn atrocities and subjugating tens of millions of people around the world that, we're empire babies, and we need to galvanize to stop the crimes that our government is perpetrating to the oppressed and marginalized people that are suffering through our policies that the vast majority of Americans have no idea because we're so misinformed.
As Glenn Greenwald says, today I sent my intention to resign from The Intercept, the news outlet I co-founded in 2013 with Jeremy Scahill and Laura Poitras, as well as from its parent company, First Look Media. The final precipitating cause is that The Intercept's editors, in violation of my contractual rights of editorial freedom, censored an article I wrote last week, refusing to publish it unless I removed all sections critical of the Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden. The candidate vehemently supported by all New York-based Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. The censored article, based on recently revealed emails and witness testimony, raised critical questions about Biden's conduct. Not content to simply prevent publication of this article at the media outlet I co-founded, these Intercept editors also demanded that I refrain from exercising a separate contractual right to publish this article with any other publication. I mean, that's amazing to me, that. I had no objection to their disagreement with my views of what this Biden evidence shows. As a last-ditch attempt to avoid being censored, I encouraged them to air their disagreements with me by writing their own articles that critique my perspectives and letting readers decide who is right, the way any confident and healthy media outlet would. But modern media outlets do not air dissent, they quash it. So censorship on my article rather than engagement with it was the path these Biden-supporting editors chose. The censored article will be published on this page shortly. It is now published here, and the emails with Intercept editors showing the censorship are here. My letter of intent to resign, which I sent this morning to First Look Media's president, Michael Bloom, is published below. As of now, I will be publishing my journalism here on Substack, where numerous other journalists, including my good friend, the great intrepid reporter Matt Taibbi, have come in order to practice journalism free of the increasingly repressive climate that is engulfing national mainstream media outlets across the country. And by the way, you won't see Chris Hedges on a lot of these, I don't know if has The Rising ever had Chris Hedges on, the Pulitzer Prize recipient Chris Hedges? I'd be surprised. This was not an easy choice. I'm voluntarily sacrificing the support of a large institution and guaranteed salary in exchange for nothing other than a belief that there are enough people who believe in the virtues of independent journalism and the need for free discourse who will be willing to support my work by subscribing. Like anyone with young children, a family, and numerous obligations, I do this with some trepidation, but also with the conviction that there is no other choice. I could not sleep at night knowing that I allowed any institution to censor what I want to say, and believe least of all a media outlet I co-founded with the explicit goal of ensuring this never happens to other journalists, let alone to me. Let alone because I've written an article critical of a powerful Democratic politician vehemently supported by the editors in the imminent national election. I don't know, I would have a lot of trouble working for a news outlet like The Intercept if they were putting out the Russiagate thing, because as I said, it's very dangerous, particularly if I'd started that particular news outlet. I really would. I think I would just have to ditch it because, they're trading on your name, your famous name. His name is very famous, and they're trading on it. And so his name is propping up that anti-Russian propaganda, which is leading to the new Cold War with Russia and an arms race, a nuclear arms race, which could be mutually assured destruction for the planet. So, it's no small potatoes. But the pathologies, illiberalism, and repressive mentality that lead to the bizarre spectacle of my being censored by my own media outlet are ones that are by no means unique to The Intercept. So basically, I'll leave that in the information section. I hope I remember to put it there. And you can read that, or you can go to Glenn Greenwald's site on Substack. And if you think about subscribing to his Substack articles, consider subscribing to journalist groups like the Empire Files, like Media Roots Radio, The Grey Zone, and the like. Because I really feel like their journalism actually is really getting to the heart of the matter, which is U.S. empire, and that's what needs to come down. It needs to fall. It is the greatest destructive force on the planet, and it has to fall. It's falling, but it's got, if everything is quashed about it and there's no talk about these terrible imperialist wars, there are millions of people dying as a result. There's millions of people that have been displaced. 58 million people, I think, in U.S. imperialist wars have been displaced as well. So, it's imperative that we all push against the U.S. national security state's narrative and the endless wars. And that's what I feel, the Empire Files and the like are doing. So I'll just read this last bit here. He says, the current iteration of The Intercept is completely unrecognizable when compared to the original vision. Rather than offering a venue for airing dissent, marginalized voices, and unheard perspectives, it is rapidly becoming just another media outlet with mandated ideological and partisan loyalties and rigid and narrow range of permitted viewpoints, ranging from establishment liberalism to soft leftism, but always anchored in ultimate support for the Democratic Party, a deep fear of offending hegemonic cultural liberalism and centre-left Twitter luminaries, and an overarching need to secure the approval and admiration of the very mainstream media outlets we created The Intercept to oppose, critique, and subvert. The thing is, like I say, I don't see how, what is the, I always have trouble with his name, Pierre Almadir, the PayPal billionaire. What sort of motivation did he have for putting money behind The Intercept, though? How did he get his billions? And usually people that are billionaires, there is something wrong with there's something wrong with how they've managed to make billions. You don't make billions of dollars unless you're in some way stepping on the heads of people, or you're exploiting workers or something. Look at Jeff Bezos. So I have to wonder when Glenn Greenwald sort of says that was his mission with The Intercept. How can I just sort of think, what was the motivation for the PayPal billionaire to back this particular outlet? And the rot started to show quite a few years ago, and I just stopped following them. Even Jim Risen was pushing, I think, the Russiagate narrative, and he was a whistleblower. It's just not good. Anyway, it's a good article, so do check it out. There's one bit that I do want to read. He does say here, the reason for this silence and this cover-up is obvious. Accounting to the public about what happened with the reality Winter story would reveal who the actual editors are who are responsible for that deeply embarrassing newsroom failure, and that would negate their ability to continue to hide behind me and let the public continue to assume that I was the person at fault for this, for a reporting process which I was completely excluded from the start. Yeah, I wondered, I don't know. That was awful what happened to Reality Winter, and there was a couple of other whistleblowers that, just dreadful handling of it. Now they're sort of facing prison, or they're in prison. Anyhow, it's a very long article, and he basically says, he'd be deeply ashamed if he remained there, since this attempt at censorship of him. and that he hopes to have the freedom with this new platform in Substack to not only continue to publish the independent and hard-hitting investigative journalism and candid analysis and opinion writing that his readers have come to expect. So anyway, he's going to continue his YouTube program, System Update. But as I said, I think that, I feel this is sort of a test, I think, for me, a test of good journalism and real journalism is when somebody is continually addressing U.S. imperialism and also continually addressing and exposing the apartheid state of Israel and the human rights atrocious crimes against Palestinians. I find the Palestinian issue in particular is a real test for journalists because there is so much propaganda about that's put out by Israel that is supported by various governments because Israel has such an incredible influence in Western governments. Incredible influence. Talk about foreign interference. If there's ever foreign interference, it would be Israel. Just recently, I don't know if you heard, Jeremy Corbyn was suspended from the UK Labour Party for anti-Semitism, for not backing up their ridiculousness about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
I've heard you this evening trying to defend your record on your vote, and then on the other hand you'll say how you're against these horrible Tory cuts, and I really can't trust you. And you got one difficult question and you immediately tried to turn it round to anti-Semitism. Jeremy Corbyn has been fighting anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms since before you were born, and you've got some brass neck to stand up there and call him an anti-Semite.
What they've decided is anti-Semitism is critique of Israel. That's what they call anti-Semitism. So you're not allowed to critique the apartheid state of Israel for fear of being called anti-Semitic. And that's why Jeremy Corbyn has been suspended now from the UK Labour Party. That's why this is the invented reason, because they really just wanted to get rid of him, basically. There's a bunch of Blairites in there, Tony Blair lovers, and Keir Starmer is a great supporter of apartheid Israel. And that's the new head of the Labour Party, and it is a SHIT show. That's what the UK Labour Party is now. So the final nail in the coffin is getting rid of, trying to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, literally like this. That just shows what a SHIT show it is. I hope that Glenn Greenwald will start reporting more on US imperialism. That would be really great. And I really hope that more of this sort of thing happens. Maybe other people who have been trying to do journalism in various journalist outlets take a leaf out of Glenn's book and go to Substack or whatever. I mean, it's not easy. This is the terrible thing. People can't live on fresh air. They have to have some sort of an income, and that's why so many of them, though, they're not only getting an income, they're getting obscene amounts of money to put out propaganda for the U.S. national security state.